What's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Well, you're about to find out that roses have many names and roses have many different smells. You're going to see a way of classifying roses that just makes sense. Be able to describe characteristics of the rose plant family. Be able to identify a plant, if given one, as belonging to the roses. List several important rose species. And be able to contrast this plant family with other plant families. Now we're going to start moving into plants that have these branched veins in their leaves, and that is one thing that roses have. A lot of plants have this, really. And they also have, well, simple leaves. They can have pinnately compound leaves. I'm going to draw this on the board, but you can always look up pinnately compound if you're at home. One characteristic that unites most roses is that they have serrated margins on their leaves. So if you look at the edge of that leaf, it looks like a serrated knife. That's what a serrated margin is. Roses often also have thorns. Although they're technically not thorns, they're little prickles coming out of the stem. Thorns are modified stems. Now, a rose flower has usually 5 sepals, 5 petals, and many anthers. The base forms something called a hypanthium, which is this little cup. And we're going to see where the hypanthium is actually pretty useful in making a certain type of fruit that roses have. Now, you may think of roses like the ones you buy in the market and say, hey, that's more than 5 petals. Well, yes, you are absolutely right. Those have been specially bred to have more petals. And that's a deal with the roses, is a lot of these plants have been highly bred to have very specific characteristics that aren't always united to what the plant family looks like as a whole. Now, the fruits, there's a special type of fruit called a pome. Look at this pear. A pear is a type of a pome, as is an apple. Remember the hypanthium where you have that little cup-like receptacle at the bottom of the flower? Well, if that becomes fleshy, you can see the ovaries in there that have been fertilized, and those little seeds have been formed, are in this little core. This little harder area called a core is part of a pome. Now, the top of a pear or an apple, you can actually sometimes find the sepals as fused to this hypanthium. Sometimes in a really good apple, you can actually find the anthers and the stamens still on the fruit. Now, of course, you don't eat those any more than you would eat the core because it's a little too fibrous, but this is what a pome looks like. Another type is a drupe. So here we have grapes, and those are a berry. Grapes are not roses. And you see the seeds are inside the mesocarp, the fleshy part, which has the epicarp, the little skin. So you have the skin, the fleshy part, and a couple of seeds. Well, with a drupe or a stone fruit, you have this endocarp and seed together, making what's called a stone. And those stones are the very hard parts of this drupe. So you have that fleshy part and then a drupe in the center. Think about cherries, apricots, and peaches. You can also have aggregate fruits. We have all those different ovaries have each swollen up, and they each have a seed in them, and they each make a little fruitlet. So raspberry fruit is actually a whole bunch of fruits put together. It's actually not a berry. You can see the grape up there. That's a berry. Now, the superpower of roses, especially for you guys, is that the stems asexually reproduce really easily. Look at all these little saplings coming off of this larger tree. Each of those could be cut and, given the right conditions, grown into a full clone of the tree. These makes it very easy to clone plants. In fact, an apple seed is not going to produce the same type of apple as the tree itself. You can clone them really easily. You can also graft them. We're going to talk about that more later. Rose plants are very friendly to you guys. Now let's look at some examples. Of course, apples were domesticated in Central Asia, China, and the Roman Empire. American apples were for cider. So if you find one of these apple trees, quote unquote, growing wild, that was just left behind from the settlers. And if you taste them, they can taste absolutely awful because they weren't made for eating. They were made for drinking. They're made for cider. So the juice would be what was of use. Modern apples have been bred to be sweeter, sweeter, and sweeter. Just look at that Honeycrisp. Go, treat yourself. You deserve an apple. Cherry, peach, nectarine, plums, and almonds are all members of the same genus, the Prunus genus. These are the stone fruit. They're the drupes. In the example of almonds, you actually eat the stone and discard the flesh. So these are agriculturally, culturally, and very decoratively important. Just look in Japan here, where these cherry blossoms are celebrated. Also Washington, D.C. Now, important to note is the stone contains cyanide. We're going to talk about almonds in class and how they don't have cyanide anymore, but they used to. So yeah, if you were to eat the stone and grind it up, that has cyanide. So, don't. However, you can swallow it, and, this too shall pass. Strawberry. The fruit here is not the red part. It's actually those little things you call the seeds. That's a type of fruit called an achene. And the reason for that is a bird is going to peck at the fleshy part and eat it. And while doing so, it'll take one of those achenes in. Now, the achenes can pass right through a bird, and it'll end up with new strawberries somewhere else. Wild strawberries are small and very flavorful. Domesticated strawberries are very large and fleshy, and honestly, I just don't see the flavor in them as well. Now, a bonus plant family for you guys is the Cucurbitaceae, the cucurbit family. So those have these 5 fused petals. You can see the bee right there enjoying those. They have male flowers, that's a male flower, and they have female flowers as well. The female flowers give rise to the fruit, and the fruit is a special thing called a pepo. We're going to discuss that a little bit in class, especially a little bit in October, because those are kind of fun. We'll probably grab one of those fruits in the fruit section. And that's pumpkins, cucumbers, and squash are all members of the cucurbit family.